Hi Photoshoppers and welcome. What have we got for you today? Well, today we're going to be looking at a technique for reducing the blotchiness of skin. This happens quite a lot with youngsters, but in adults as well. And we're going to be using a really targeted adjustment using the hue and saturation adjustment layer. So let's get on with it. Now the first thing is this image has a little bit of too much warmth in it anyway around the skin areas, but I do like the warmth around the outside. I think it's just spilled in a little bit, so we'll deal with that as well. In fact, we'll deal with that first. But first I just want to identify a couple of the areas that we might be looking at. So I'll just get my paintbrush just to be able to do a little bit of identifying. So the areas I'm talking about is like round here, around the cheek areas, and round the chin. There's a little bit on the chin area. There's probably something round here, down in this area, where it's a little bit red. It's gone too red. Everything else seems not that bad. Okay, so let's have a look what we can do. And we'll try this with adjustment layers. So first I'll try it with, let's say, a colour balance adjustment layer. Now colour balance, here it is, it basically gives us opposites. So now for the general run-of-the-mill stuff here, I'd like it to be a little bit less red in the red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of cyan to the reds. So if I just move that over a little bit, you can see it'll just cool it off just a little bit. If I go too far, it goes really weird. But I'm just looking at just cooling that off a little bit. And it's not done too bad a job there, and it's left the background pretty good. So it's just taking a little bit of that saturation out of that skin tone. Yeah, okay. I'll leave that as it is. That's pretty good. And now what I'll do, we'll go for these blotchy areas, and I need to try and identify exactly where they are. So my method of choice is to use a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And here it is. And I'll just zoom in just a little bit, just so we can see what we're doing. Then I'm going to spacebar drag to get the face in the middle. There we go. Right, now I could just move the saturation down, but what I'm doing is I'm just taking the saturation out of everything, which is not what I want to do. So I'll reset that back to 0. So I need to try and identify these areas where the blotchiness is. So how can we do that? Well, let's try and target some of those colours. Let's say, well, let's target the reds. Now I know this may target something around the outside, but we can deal with that. So I've now targeted the reds, and what I've got now is here is Photoshop's impression of what red really is. And the two vertical bars are everything that is selected in. So everything it thinks is red is in between these two vertical bars. And then these little triangles, these are the drop-off areas where it trails off into the magentas, and it trails off into the yellows and the greens. And we can click and move that around, or we can click and we can become more specific or less specific by moving these little center bars, or we can control the drop-off area by moving these backwards and forwards like that, making a bigger drop-off area or a smaller drop-off area. Now, so I can visually see more precisely exactly where the colours are being affected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the hue. So I'm going to put the hue down, right down to yeah, it looks awful. But now I can see exactly the colours that I'm going to be targeting. So what I can do is I'll click and drag this whole slider over down here, and you can see now how it's now limiting and showing me exactly where the adjustment is, and I'm looking at making that adjustment just where all these areas are in his cheek. So we'll just move it a little bit further over, maybe somewhere like yeah, somewhere like that. Okay, well I can go with that, and I know it's picking out some of these things in the background, but on some of the bits in the background it won't matter anyway. But if I needed to correct that, then I've got a mask that I can do that on. Okay, so I've now identified that whatever adjustments I make now are just happening in these areas that are this weird colour. So I can now set the hue back to 0. And what I can do is just take it towards the right. And you see, if I go too far, I'll go really, really yellow and then into the greens. But what I'm looking at doing is just adding, see, if I go too far, you can see that's bringing all that red back again, the blotchiness. But if I just take it to the right, just a little bit, it does even out those skin tones. That is pretty cool. Let me just turn that on and off for you. So that's before. You can see there is some little red blotchy areas, and that's evened it out very nicely, thank you. There we go, before and after. But it has affected the lips. It's affected the other areas as well. And I didn't want it to affect the lips. So now that's where we've got a mask. So I can go and get my paintbrush. I can grab my black as my foreground colour, get a nice size brush, maybe a little bit smaller. I'm making it smaller with the square bracket keys, and then I'm just going to paint back in through this mask the proper lip colour. And then anywhere else that's a problem, I mean, actually down here, that's not actually that bad. I'll just show you. That was quite red. If I turn that off and back on again, you can see that I've now really, really evened out those skin tones. Now, there are some areas in the background. Let's just have a look at them. I'll just turn it off and on. Yeah, you can see these areas that have gone a little bit less saturated. But if I wanted them to come back, I just paint out with the mask. So I've got brush here, so I can just paint those areas basically back in again. So if there's anywhere that I think, yeah, I'd like that to be as it was, I can just use the mask to paint it back in again. So we'll just zoom out on that and see what we've done. Okay, so I'll just drop that back again, and these are the areas that we started with that said we were going to try and correct. So we got some little bits. I'll just turn them back off again, and you'll see that we've got some red areas, really blotchy skin and round the finger, and an overall warm, too warm a hue. So what I've done is with a colour balance adjustment layer, I've evened out the tones a little bit over the whole image, and then with a hue and saturation adjustment layer, I've evened out those little blotchy areas. I'll just get rid of that so we can see our work. So what I'll do is I'll just put those in a group. So I'll select them both and press Ctrl and G, and that puts them in a group, and I'll call that adjustments. And then I can turn it on and off. So that's before and that's after. And that's before and that's after. And I think that's gone in a good direction. Well, Photoshoppers, that's it for this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up or leave me a comment under the video. And please, just hang around a few seconds longer and click that subscribe button and be part of my Photoshop learning community. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.